However, as they reached a particularly narrow opening, it became clear that the conditions were worsening rapidly. The three made the difficult but prudent decision to turn back. Their return journey required them to cross the upper smithy, a section infamous for its instability and sheer drops. He moved cautiously, testing each step before committing his weight. The floor beneath him was unstable, a thin crust of rock covering a void. He felt it shift slightly but pressed forward. Then, with no warning, the ground beneath his feet crumbled away. George plummeted into darkness. 30 feet or more than 9 meters below, he landed with a sickening impact on a jagged outcrop of rock. The force of the fall knocked the wind out of him, but he remained conscious. Agonizing pain surged through his body. His jaw was shattered, his ribs cracked, his right leg twisted unnaturally. Blood oozed from a deep wound on his face, pooling beneath him. Somewhere deep inside, he felt a sharp burning sensation. His spleen had been lacerated. He was broken, unable to move, and alone in the abyss, carefully climbing down the treacherous rock face. Below, George was gasping, his breath shallow and erratic. When Mark reached him, he could see the severity of the injuries. His friend was in a dire state. Blood seeped from a gash running from George's mouth to his chin. His limbs were at unnatural angles. His breathing was strained, his body trembling with shock. Mark knew they had no time to waste. He looked up at Melissa, and all it said was that they needed help. Making the hardest decision of his life, Mark turned and began the arduous climb back to the surface. Every minute mattered. George's condition was deteriorating. His body was shutting down, his consciousness slipping in and out like a flickering light. Melissa stayed by his side, speaking softly, keeping him tethered to reality. The cave pressed in around them, silent and unmoving, as George fought to stay alive. Melissa did everything she could to keep George conscious. His face was pale, his lips trembling, his body racked with pain. The journey down had taken over an hour. Getting out, with his broken body strapped to a stretcher, seemed impossible. He fought against the fear, clinging to the sound of Melissa's voice, the dim glow of her headlamp illuminating the darkness. The first rescuers arrived 2 hours after Mark had sounded the alarm. Their voices echoed through the cavern, a beacon of hope in the oppressive blackness. They found George barely clinging to consciousness, his breathing ragged, his body dangerously cold. Assessing his injuries, they knew the extraction would be excruciatingly slow. Carefully, they stabilized him, ensuring his fractured limbs were immobilized before attempting to move him. The stretcher was maneuvered into place, but the passageway was so tight, they had to pass him through inch by inch. Each movement carefully calculated, each foothold tested and retested. It took over 24 hours. By the time George emerged into the cold, damp air of the cave's entrance, dawn was breaking. His body was battered, his face barely recognizable beneath dried blood and swelling. But he was alive. George was rushed to the hospital, where he underwent multiple surgeries. His jaw was reconstructed, his ribs healed over time, and his leg, though severely damaged,